right, good morning. Yes, Prep. It's me, Keith DeRosier. I'm the Director of Mathematics. And this video has been put together to provide you some information about revisions to the Yes Prep calculator policy for STAR exams. This is effective February of 2020, and this is in response to changes that were made at the state level for what students can and cannot have access to on their calculators. Please note that this is not impacting our common assessments. This is all about our STAR tested courses. So that's Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2. We are going to spend just a little bit of time looking at where we've been with the graphing calculator, how we've been handling things, where we're going and why. We'll talk a little bit about the training and support that is being offered. We'll then actually get some practice time with the TI Inspire and some moves that you'll need to be able to do or others on your campus will be able to do. We'll talk about our policy for other calculators being used, and then finally next steps for everyone. Okay, so this video specifically we're talking about the TI Inspire calculators. There's the TI Inspire CX, we've got the TI Inspire, that's the second one, and then the TI Inspire CX2 just came out this summer. These three are the allowed TI Inspire calculator. So whenever I say TI Inspire, I'm talking about these three, but nothing else. These three are allowed. There's a calculator called the TI Inspire CAS. This calculator is not allowed by Yes Prep. It is not allowed by the state. Students should not have this calculator for any reason whatsoever. They may have other calculators. They could have a TI-83 or a TI-84 or possibly a Casio calculator, but it's these three calculators on the left that we're focusing on in this video. Okay. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is press to test mode. What press to test mode does is by placing the calculators in press to test mode, we can disable calculator features and also prevent students from accessing information and games that were stored in their calculators before we put them in press to test mode. You'll know that a calculator is in press to test mode in one of three ways. When you first turn on the calculator, you'll see this image. It'll pop up and it says press to test. It'll tell you that the handheld is in test mode, and then it should explicitly list the features that have been disabled. You can also see on the main screen that there's going to be a little lock in the top right-hand corner. And lastly, the thing that is most easy to identify is that on the very top of the calculator, there's going to be a blinking light. So these are three ways you can tell if a calculator is in press to test mode. And there's going to be a quick check for understanding on this later, so keep paying attention. So where we've been. Prior to taking the common assessments or the STAR tests, but we don't do this for AP exams. The College Board does not have this expectation. Students had to place their TI Inspire calculators in press to test mode. In most cases, this was happening in class days before the assessment was taken. And then on the day of the STAR test, teachers and administrators would confirm that all calculators are in press to test mode. Remember the three things. You could check that it was in press to test mode by turning it on and seeing press to test mode pop up. Secondly, you'll see the lock in the top right-hand corner. And then thirdly, you would see the blinking light on the top of the calculator. That's what we've been doing. Here's where we're going and why. Where we're going, and this takes effect immediately for our STAR-tested courses, students with the TI Inspire must place their calculator in press to test mode at the start of the STAR test. Not days before, but at the very start of the STAR test. And then they're going to take their calculator out of press to test mode before leaving the test room. Now you might be wondering, why the change? Let's talk about that. So as of February 2020, the technology use guidelines that TEA pushes out, well, those have changed. This is not a yes prep change, this is a statewide change. For handheld calculators, all memory must be cleared to factory default before and after testing. That's where press to test mode comes in. Any programs or applications must be removed or disabled prior to testing. Press to test mode will take care of that. And if included on the device, the following functions must be disabled during testing: geometry functions, graphing implicit equations and inequalities, and graphing inequalities, and functions that automatically calculate mean absolute deviation. You may be watching the video right now and having a little panic. You're like, I don't even know what these things are. Don't worry about it. I will get you there. And so we need to have a yes prep policy and training that is in compliance with what TEA is pushing out. So that's part of the why. Okay. Let's talk about test logistics. For us, the big issue is that once students are in press to test mode, they can record formulas, they can record graphs, anything like that once they're in press to test mode. And so the problem is if, say, the Algebra 1 teachers have the kids put the calculators in press to test mode days before the unit test, a kid can then put in anything they would want on the calculator, and they're bringing that into the testing environment. That creates a testing irregularity for the campus, and the student scores could be invalidated. If we don't take the calculators out of press to test mode before they leave the room, then they could actually be recording information about test questions in the calculator and bringing that out of the testing environment. Again, huge issues. We need to avoid all of that. So, before the test starts, there's 2 key actions that need to be taken. Number 1, ensure that no student has their calculator in press to test mode. Okay? If they are in press to test mode, you're going to need to get them out of press to test mode. Training on this will appear later in the video. You will know this is done correctly when you see no lights blinking on the top of the calculator. Second key action is that all students will need to place their calculator in press to test mode. You'll know that this has been done correctly because all TI Inspire calculators will have a blinking light at the top of their calculator. During the test, you and the proctors are going to aggressively monitor student calculator usage. Students may not, for any reason, share a calculator with another student. And then finally, after the test is over, but before students leave the testing room, every calculator will have to be taken out of press to test mode. You'll need to have at least 3 to 4 of the calculator to calculator links to ensure that this happens as quickly and efficiently as possible. More on the calculator to calculator links later. Okay, so let's talk about training and support. There's been some initial messaging to Math 8, Algebra 1, and the Algebra 2 teachers in email, over Teams, and then later this week at Reading Day, I'm going to be pushing into all of the testing rooms to talk to Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 teachers about the change. This is a significant change from what we've done in the past, and I need them to be aware because they are also going to have to be part of the training process for the students. Training for the campus testing coordinators, well, that's what's happening right now. A video and PowerPoint modeling the processes for getting into and out of press to test mode. As requested and as needed, other support from me. And then if there are any other ideas, when we get together and for the campus testing coordinator training, if there are other ideas or suggestions that you have, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to help guide us through this process. Okay, so here we go. We're going to get some practice time with the TI Inspire. There's 3 steps in particular that we're going to look at. Number 1, identifying press to test mode. Secondly, putting a calculator into press to test mode. And third, taking a calculator out of press to test mode. We're going to go over all 3 of those things right now. I'm actually going to rotate off of the PowerPoint and you'll see me modeling with a live calculator what this looks like. So here goes. Oh, quick check for understanding. What are the 3 different ways you can check that a calculator is in press to test mode? Remember, there's 3 things that you're looking for. How are you going to know that you're in press to test mode? Okay. When you first turn on the calculator, you'll see the message about press to test mode. Secondly, that lock in the top right-hand corner. And third, the blinking light. So, here we go. Okay, here we go. I have got here 2 different calculators. You're only going to see one right now, but this is a TI Inspire CX calculator. This is an allowed graphing calculator. But let's see if we're in press to test mode or not. I'm going to turn it on. And I know it's a little bit blurry, but when it first turns on, I don't see a message that says calculators in press to test mode. So that's clue number 1 that this calculator is the way I want it to appear when kids first go into the testing room. The other thing I'm going to look at, there's no lock in the top right-hand corner, and there's no blinking light. If there was blinking, I would see it. I would see it here on the top. Specifically, I'll see it right over there by the port. That's not happening. This calculator is not in press to test mode. That is a good thing for the start of the testing environment. Okay, let's look at another calculator. This is a TI Inspire. This is a slightly older model, but it is still a TI Inspire. I see the lock in the top right-hand corner. This calculator is in press to test mode. If you can see it, there's the green light at the top that's blinking. And if I were to turn the calculator off and then turn it right back on, I get the message that the calculator is in press to test mode. Eventually, we want the calculators to be in press to test mode, but not at the start of the testing environment. So, there we go. So let's go now into how do you put a calculator in press to test mode. So in order to do that, the calculator has to be off. So it's control and that home button in the top right-hand corner. Students should know how to do this. To put a calculator in press to test mode, you're going to need 2 fingers. You're going to hit the escape button and the home button at the same time, and you're going to hold them down until the calculator turns on, and it'll say, press to test, do you want to enter press to test mode? That's what we're looking for. And students will be trained on this. The options that are checked off here, these are the things that are disabled. Remember, the TEA says we need to limit geometry functions. That is checked. That's a good thing. If I hit tab, or I can use the arrows here, limit geometry functions, I want them limited. This disable function and conic grab move, that's not something we're worried about, but it's also not something that kids in Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 need. Leave it disabled. Vector functions, leave it disabled. Disable is prime function, differential equations. It's this disable inequality graphing that absolutely must be disabled. The 3D graphing, we're going to leave it disabled, but we don't have to. Disable implicit graphing, conic templates, this has to be disabled. Limit trigonometric functions, we're going to leave it disabled, although it's not necessary because that's not tested in Math 8, Algebra 1, or Algebra 2. Same thing with the log base B template. We are going to enable this last one. Disable the polynomial root finder and simultaneous equation solver. Some of our Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 teachers have been showing students how to use those features. So rather than upset the curricular flow and what students have been taught, we're going to enable that feature. To do that, you're going to hit the middle button right here. And so you can see that the check mark has gone away. Go down to using my arrows, go over to enter press to test mode. Everything has a check mark next to it except for the last one. And we're going to hit enter press to test mode. The calculator will now save. It's going to reboot. And we're going to see 3 pieces of information, 3 pieces that confirm the calculator was in press to test mode once it finishes rebooting. Okay, so the calculator has shut down, it has rebooted, and now you are in press to test mode. Okay, it says the handheld is in press to test mode, pre-existing content is disabled. That's the thing that says kids will not be able to access anything that they've previously saved. And if I scroll down, I see check marks on everything except the last box. And students, once the calculator is in press to test mode, they cannot change the features. They can't enable or disable things. So confirmation number 1 that we did this correctly. Number 2, we see the little lock in the top right-hand corner. And number 3, we should see a blinking light now. This time it's orange. Okay, great. That is putting your calculator in press to test mode. Students will get practice with this with their teachers, and when they come to you, you're going to have them put the calculator in press to test mode. So let's switch gears. Let's look at a calculator that is already in press to test mode, and let's talk about what you're going to have to do to get it out of press to test mode. Well, to do this, you're going to have to get a little fancier, and you're going to need 2 calculators. They don't have to both be the same type of TI Inspire, but they both have to be TI Inspires. And you're going to need this calculator to calculator link that we're going to talk about more in the video once we get back to the PowerPoint. I'm going to connect at the very top of the first calculator. I'm going to connect at the very top of the second calculator, and I'm going to put them both down. Okay. These calculators are linked. This is one of the ways you can take a calculator out of press to test mode, and it's the only one we're going to go over in this video. So what you're going to do on either calculator, you only have to do it on one, is we're going to go on over to option 2, which is My Documents. You're going to hit the Document button, which is over here. In fact, I'm only going to show this one calculator. We only need to be connected to the second calculator. You'll hit the Dock button. You'll see some options that show up on the left-hand side. Option 9 is Press to Test. Select 9, and you're going to exit Press to Test. And so you can see the one on the right is the one I was doing the work on, but they are both in the reboot process. Once you see this progress bar going across, you can unplug the calculators if you would like. It's good to go. These calculators will be out of press to test mode. Excellent. The one on the right is going a little bit faster. And now we're doing the reboot. Here we go. When it comes back, you will see that the calculator is no longer in press to test mode. There's no lock, there's no message, there's no blinking light. Now, quick little check for understanding here. When are you going to do this work with taking the calculator out of press to test mode? There's 2 times when this is going to happen. The first time is if a student comes into the room and the calculator is in press to test mode. You have to take the calculator out of press to test mode in that situation. The second time is going to be applied to all students once the test is over, and that's why we're going to make sure that you have multiple calculator to calculator links, and you'll go through the same process then. Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 teachers are responsible for practicing with this with their students leading up to the STAR test, so that should make your life a little easier. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So, back in the PowerPoint. We've practiced all of the skills. I hope that you're feeling comfortable with that. If not, go back and watch the video as many times as you need to. I'm going to skip past all of these. This is the PowerPoint deck that teachers will have access to, and it takes them through all of the steps if they'd like to see it that way. So let's come back to the calculator to calculator cables. Sarah Beecham and the assessment team have gone ahead, and they're going to be ordering 20 of these cables for each campus so that you will have them available. Now, depending on the number of testing rooms that you have, depending on your setup, 20 cables may not be enough. You might want to have some more. The assessment team is only going to be able to loan you 20. The additional cables would have to come out of your campus budget. You can get those cables by calling 800 TI Cares. That's actually their phone number. The cost of the cable is about $4.95 each before tax and shipping. We are tax exempt. They don't do any bulk pricing, and it's going to take about 2 weeks for the shipment to arrive on campus. So if you think you're going to want to have more than 20 of these calculator to calculator cables, you're going to want to get on the ordering process soon. Okay, let's talk about other calculators. There are some other calculators that students might have with them, but we have been messaging for about 5 years now to every student in 8th grade and above that the calculator that they need to have access to is a TI Inspire. That's what they should be buying in 8th grade. If they have a TI 8384, if they have a Casio, if they have some other calculator, I mean, that's fine. That's their choice. Sometimes these get handed down by older siblings. They might be a little less expensive. But the situation is this. I'm not going to do training videos for all the different calculator types that are out there. The TI Inspire should be what 95% of our students are using. My recommendation, and I'm going to discuss this with the impacted teachers later at reading day this week, is that if a kid has a different calculator, that's fine, but they are responsible for figuring out how to clear the memory. There's no press to test mode on these other calculators, but they are going to be responsible for clearing the memory, demonstrating to you that the memory has been cleared at the start of the test, and then again at the end of the test. And if they don't know how to clear the memory, then they are not going to be allowed to use that calculator during the test. It creates too much of a problem or potential problem of students bringing in information they shouldn't have and taking information out that we don't want them to. Okay, finally, let's talk about next steps for everyone. Well, for me, creating the video for press to test mode. High five, I'm done with that. We're going to do an in-person training with Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 teachers later this week. And I'm going to be repeating the message as often as possible through newsletters and some emails. I really want to make sure that every Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 teacher understands what's happening and they message this appropriately to their students. For the math teachers, they're going to need to check all student calculators. They're going to practice putting the calculators in press to test mode and clearing the memory. And they're going to reach out if they need any support. For the campus testing coordinators, my request is that you check in with all Math 8, Algebra 1, and Algebra 2 teachers on your campus. Make sure they've trained kids how to put the calculators in and out of press to test mode. Make sure they understand which features need to be disabled. Make sure that they're not using those disabled features with kids. Secondly, make sure that you know how to identify and manage press to test mode. Maybe you have a dean of instruction that's going to be supporting you in this process. Maybe not. And then finally, reach out to me as needed for additional support. Please remember, we are going to get together on March 11th for a training. So if you have any questions, save those questions up until then. Or if you'd like, you can email them to me in advance and I'll do the best that I can. And with that, I just want to say thank you for your time and your attention to detail. I know we've got a lot going on here.